What do you think is kind of the key of just, being successful with NIL? Because I don't think there's one straight path in terms of developing your brand just outside of athletics.
Yeah, 100%. And I think you said it best. There isn't one straight path, but I think that it's really being yourself, honing in on your personality. The audience wants to get to know you, and that's kind of what Overtime does best.
She is the director of Overtime Select and the director of content operations at Overtime. We welcome Sasha Malas onto Hoopsology. Welcome, Sasha.
Hi, Justin. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for coming on to the show. Really appreciate it. Before we hop into Overtime Select, we have a tradition on our podcast. We just discuss everything basketball culture. So you can take this question any way you want it. What is your first or favorite basketball memory?
My first or favorite basketball memory. Okay, so this is kind of crazy. I am from New York, and I was a part of the Linsanity culture. So that is one of my first real strong basketball memories. I was at a game at MSG when Jeremy Lin went off. And I remember the Garden being so electric. I know that that's like so random and so specific, but that is really one of the first moments I had engaged in basketball culture.
No, that's awesome. I remember Linsanity is probably one of the most iconic just moments, I think, overall in this NBA history overall, just when that happened. So that's incredible. You were there just to witness that. And I think it's kind of an appropriate segue because that moment was pretty active kind of in the beginnings of the social media era and what we're seeing now take place in all of sports. And I just want to get your synopsis and your opinions of what's happening now with Overtime, and particularly Overtime Select. If you can just give a quick breakdown of what that is in terms of how it's going to really affect women's basketball and how it has synergy just with NAU, high school basketball, and just the rest of basketball culture, et cetera.
Yeah, of course. So Overtime is a media company that's been around for about 7 years now. And we created Overtime Elite, which is going into its 4th season this year. And that is a men's basketball league for the elite high school age basketball players. After that, we created OT7, a 7-on-7 football league, OTX, a boxing league, and Overtime Select was really our next big move. It was very clear that the women's game was expanding, and Overtime had many women's specific events. We call them the takeover, and the views and the engagement of high school women's basketball and what we were seeing on social media and how energized these females were when coming to our building and our arena was electric. So for us, Overtime Select was really the next best step and the obvious next move for us as a business. And women's basketball, as you see, is completely taking off, and it's unbelievably good for business. And it's just been such an amazing experience to watch it grow and also grow these youth women's high school basketball players and have them involved in our culture and be a part of the Overtime community.
From what I understand, there's a lot of elite basketball players taking place in about 4 week span, and they'll get other resources, including how to just handle and get into the NIL space. Can you kind of go into specifically from the participants what they're hoping to gain from just a skills perspective? We'll talk about NIL in a second, but just in terms of what's on the court, what do you hope they gain from just I understand there's a bunch of other advisors from the WNBA and other high popular women's basketball players. What do you hope from a skill perspective that the participants take away from taking part in this?
So what Overtime Select is doing is that we're allowing all of the top women to come and compete in Atlanta. It gives them the opportunity to get out of their high school circuits, get out of their AAU circuits, and they're so used to and accustomed to playing the same group of women, or they're used to being the best of the best in their high school class. So what we are doing is bringing together everybody. We're bringing people from EYBL and across all of the different circuits, and they can come and participate in Overtime Select and get the best of the best competition. So one, we're giving them exposure to playing all women and giving them the opportunity to really compete against girls that they haven't necessarily had the opportunity to play before. So that's the biggest thing, is elite competition on the court. Outside of that, we also have an amazing coaching staff and team in Atlanta where we'll conduct practices, workouts, training. We have an amazing human recovery and department where they can have access to all of our recovery equipment, and the goal is really to give them everything and more. And obviously, we only have the girls in Atlanta for such a small amount of time, so really embracing basketball and giving them all the opportunities. But it's to your point, and I know you said we would get to this, it's really not just about basketball.
Sure.
And it's giving them access to so many other things outside of developing their skills.
So let's talk about outside of the court, and that's NIL. And I asked a bunch of journalists and other people in this field about kind of the negatives of NIL, just because I am a proponent of NIL, and I don't really see any like negatives of having this. I think it's great for just college sports. And I just want to get your perspective of NIL with this high school sports in particular. Can you break that down in terms of high school athletes and how that affects in terms of NIL? Because I think from like the mainstream sports coverage, that's usually a college story, but it also affects just high schoolers as well. Can you kind of discuss that as well?
Yeah, so these high school girls have such a unique opportunity to be the next Paige Beckers and Angel Reeses and Caitlin Clarks, and building and growing their name, image, and likeness when they're in the high school stages is so imperative, because it's building their social platform and building their social presence, understanding the brands that they want to work with, can work with, and really learning how to work with these partners. So it's really starting to develop them in their youth ages, so they can be the next best and have all the opportunities that these girls have had. Obviously, there's rules and regulations due to high school state associations with NIL and how to engage with athletes in high school. But our goal is to give them the tools so when they go to college, they are building their presence and their brand, that they have ample opportunities.
So what kind of key advice do they receive from developing their NIL brands? Because we've seen this on multiple, just through multiple sports, just men's and women's athletics, multiple personalities do well. Some, you see some personalities that are really extroverted, some they're just really introverted, but they're really excel at their sports. What do you think is kind of the key of just being successful with NIL? Because I don't think there's one straight path in terms of developing your brand just outside of athletics.
Yeah, 100%. And I think you said it best. There isn't one straight path, but I think that it's really being yourself, honing in on your personality. The audience wants to get to know you, and that's kind of what Overtime does best. We give our audience of 100 million followers the opportunity to get to know these girls and their personalities, and that's what people are looking for and craving. So if these women are themselves and are willing to show a glimpse of their personal life to the audience or behind the scenes at Overtime Select, I think that's what people are really craving. But we'll be hosting an NIL summit as a part of Overtime Select to give the girls access to brands like Snapchat and Meta to learn how to appropriately build your brands on those platforms, as well as outside of just building your brand from a social media standpoint, courses with Chase through financial literacy, and then access to other amazing partners and brands from just learning how to holistically work with partners in the future.
Can you speak to the financial literacy aspect? Because I find that, I'm a millennial, just growing up in the 90s. You hear so many athletes not knowing how to manage their money. You hear all these kind of horror stories across all sports in terms of kind of the pitfalls of, not maintaining just their different financials. But nowadays, it starts from a very young age of just youth out there in different athletics being aware of just how to handle their financial situation. Do you think they're aware of just the consequences of what is happening? They're younger. I mean, now they're money's being talked to at a bigger level at a younger age. Do you think that what's kind of their reaction to receiving this financial literacy? Are they open to it? Do they not realize that it's not going to really affect them till later? Like, what is kind of their reception of receiving that information at just an earlier age compared to other generations in which they didn't really have this information?
Yeah, so we actually surveyed all of our athletes and and worked with them to decide how we were going to build a lot of the programming for Overtime Select. And financial literacy was something that came across our plate very consistently from the girls, just something that they didn't necessarily know about. How could we learn more? Obviously, that was obvious to us that it was important to bring in some sort of programming around financial literacy. So what our plan is giving the girls a course and then giving their parents a course. So everybody gets an experience, and it's going to be targeted specific towards obviously the demographic and the audience that's receiving the information. We don't expect that these women are going to come out of this course with full ability to know how to manage their money, but just giving them little tools and understanding this is what this means and this is what this means is really the biggest importance for us. Just if they leave with one piece of information that they can take back with them, I think that's the most important part. But we got it from them, and that's really why we decided to open the doors and give them the opportunity to hear from experts in the space.
A quick timeout from the interview to request a favor. If you love our interviews, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and like this video to hear more interviews from the world of basketball, featuring journalists from SB Nation, ESPN, CBS Sports, and The Athletic. Now, back to the interview. Women's basketball is experiencing just a high level of popularity now. And I think for a casual audience, I think they just think it's happening because of Caitlin Clark and it's only this year. When in actuality, this has been taking place over several years, and particularly through the movement of social media. Can you kind of discuss that in terms of, you mentioned earlier about Paige Buckers. I know even Angel Reese, Caitlin Clark, a lot of people, even Juju Watkins, a lot of just basketball fans are aware of these players earlier, even before they even put on a college, uniform. So can you kind of talk about that grassroots of just having that established connection with just a hardcore basketball fan base that eventually evolves into what we're seeing with ratings, in college basketball, and what we're seeing with the WNBA, that this has been just years in the making in terms of what we're seeing now with women's basketball?
100%, it has been years in the making, and it's amazing to see that it's happening now. But to your point, it has been going on for so long. We've been working with athletes like Paige Buckers and Zia Cook and Flau'jae Johnson and all these big names that you see in college and the WNBA now since they were in high school. So they had a loyal fan base when they were in high school. And when we would do documentaries or coverage or highlights of Paige and her peers, they were electric. They went viral on Overtime. They were super successful. Our audience wanted to see it. We had such a fan base for women's basketball. And really, when we started our takeover events with these high school girls in 2019, we really noticed such a rise. And honestly, the girls, their coverage was so elite, and how it expanded across social media was so influential that other girls growing up are seeing them and saying, oh, I want to do this, or I want to play like this person. And we've actually noticed that a lot with Overtime Select, where we're getting DMs from really young, excited hoopers that want to be in Overtime Select in the future. So it really is holistic, but it has been going on for so long already, and it's just amazing to see it all obviously at the forefront right now.
What would be your advice for those young hoopers that are reaching out they want to be a part of Overtime Select, along with their game on the court, just how to get the attention to take part in this? What would be kind of your advice just to kind of get noticed?
I think the whole thing is just continuing to be yourself. If you have a social media presence, great. But if you are the kind of kid that wants to keep your head down when you're younger and just focus on the basketball, like that also works. We have so many girls, and we have an amazing grassroots team that is out there in the field recruiting. And we understand that some of our girls have a massive social media presence, and we also understand that some of our girls don't, but are looking to learn how to build one. So I don't think it's necessarily like just about you have to have your brand built and all of this exposure already to be a part of Overtime Select. We're really in the weeds, looking across all different circuits and finding the best of the best to participate.
Can you discuss how the advisors work with Overtime Select as well? I understand it's a very impressive list in terms of
Yes.
having those mentors access to these high schoolers, and they just have that relationship that could have a lot of synergy just beyond this short period of time that can last their entire career. So can you just talk about kind of who you wanted to select in terms of your advisory board, and then how that relationship moves past just Overtime Select in terms of having this mentoree mentor relationship that moves on for a long time.
So when we were selecting our advisors, we obviously wanted to pick a vast group of people. So we have people like Simone Augustus, who's a legend in the space, but then you have people like Kalia Copper and Brianna Stewart and Afisa Collier, who are currently in the WNBA and MVPs and all-stars and playing in the Olympics. So you have all of these amazing, current, very successful women who have led the way for these young up-and-coming women. And then it was also really important to have athletes that have been through overtime. So Paige Becker, Zaya Cook, Haley Jones, Flau'jae Johnson have all been heavily a part of overtime and understand what it's like to either play it overtime or be a part of it and broadcast it overtime. So picking our advisors was really selective, but we also were looking for women that wanted to be involved, had opinions, wanted to help provide advice on who's an elite athlete that we think should be selected. So they've been heavily involved, and we've had Paige Beckers come back and do content series with the girls. This weekend, Zaya Cook and Haley Jones are going to be in town, and they'll be in the broadcast booth, so helping commentate on the game, but they'll also be mentoring the girls and in the weeds with them. Obviously, like I said, the Olympics are going on, so some of our women are in Paris right now. But pre one of our events for Captains Weekend, when we had our 9 captains in town, all of our advisors wrote a letter to the captains, just wishing them luck and expressing to them why this is such a good opportunity. Another example is the twins, Mia and Maya Paldo, have since, because of Overtime Select, developed a relationship with Zaya Cook, who is one of our mentors, and they had a question for her about how to build their brand. And they actually gave her a call and she answered, and it was a very engaging phone call. So we'll have people cycling through. Flau'jae Johnson will be back in a few weeks. And they all just want to be involved and they want to help and give back, but they also see the value that overtime provides, which is really, really amazing to work with such incredible women and leaders.
So, to the best of your ability, I attended a social media conference here in the Denver, Colorado area, and all the major companies were there. And I just found it interesting. What popped in my mind is, what is the future of kind of the social media space? Everything's changing so organically, so quickly. To the best of your estimation, do you have any kind of like? I think I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I would expect that staying one step ahead of all the trends is probably a priority in terms of these athletes and just making sure that they remain on the cutting edge of what is out there. Do you see any social media trends right now that may not be getting too much coverage or may not being taken advantage of, that you see maybe in 5 years that's going to be the next new thing? Like right now, there's TikTok, there's X, there's Meta, Instagram, Snapchat. Do you see kind of any other platforms that not a lot of people are talking about that you could see being a factor in terms of young athletes being able to take advantage of?
Oh, that's a really great question. Obviously, like you said, there are all the common ones, but I think what Overtime does best is we have an elite social media team. And the coolest part for Overtime, and we try to give this information to the athletes, is when there is a trend or where there is something going on, we are the first to be on it. Like that is the goal. That has always been the goal. So when Overtime was created, we were almost at a disadvantage because Instagram had already been in existence and all the other major sports brands were ahead of us. But then when TikTok came on the scene, we created our TikTok account and we were able to keep up with all the different sports networks and sports companies. So it was imperative for us to be on that trend and show that we can make an impact in this space. So to your point, our social media team and our head of social, Tom Weingarten, who I actually think spoke at that Denver conference that you were at, is so good at what they do. And for us, the biggest thing is letting the girls have access. So they can DM the Overtime Select Instagram account, or they can DM any of our accounts, and we have somebody on the other end responding and being available for them. And if they have an idea, or if they have a question, or if there's something that they think they should do, or like we're able to engage with them, which is really amazing. So an example was like Chloe Kitts had a TikTok that she wanted to create with Dawn Staley, and she reached out to me and we helped her develop it. And then we reposted, or we posted it actually on Overtime WBB, and then she was able to repost it because she wanted to see the coverage and the growth and have Overtime engage with it. And there are thousands of examples like that, but I don't necessarily know if there's a platform right now that I'm thinking of, but I do think that we're always going to be the first on the trend, and we will want to continue to help the athletes grow their pages, because when they grow, it's beneficial for everybody, including themselves, obviously.
How do you maintain the balance with the athletes in particular, with what's going on the court, and then also there's studies, and then as well you have this new element that's taken place over the last, I don't know, 15, 20 years now, with the rise of social media. Before, athletes just had to worry just media appearances here or there, but that's not 24/7. You know, there's not television following them all around. But now with social media, anything can be created content 24/7. So what does that balance looks like kind of in 2024 in terms of these athletes, having time to decompress just from the pressures of what's taking place on the court, but also having to maintain all these things? Is that something that athletes nowadays, they're just so used to it that's pretty easy for them? Or do you think there's some guidance there in terms of maintaining just that balance overall?
I think there's 100% guidance. I'm sure that generation is more used to it, but there's so much pressure. There is so much more pressure with social media, and Overtime and Overtime Select our goal is to be the positive outlet that covers women positively and showcases their amazing skills and grows them. But yes, to your point, there's school, and there's homework, and there's all the different leagues and AAU, and we want to give them the opportunity to do everything. But obviously, taking care of yourself and your body and your mental health is absolutely the most imperative. So I would just say to any of these women and athletes that are going through it is obviously like, and I think Kalia Copper actually said it in one of her interviews, but like when you need for Overtime Select, when you need to tune out, like shut it down when you need space, but it's easier said than done sometimes. So just really focusing on yourself and doing what's best for you is always going to matter the most in the long run.
Sasha, this has been a fantastic chat. Thank you very much for spending some time on our podcast. Can you please let our audience know where they can find yourself on social media, Overtime, and then again, any other projects that Overtime is working on that you want our audience to be aware of?
Yes, of course. Thank you so much for having me. This was such a great conversation. It was so nice to meet you and tell you more about Overtime Select. Please tune in to our games for Overtime Select. They'll be streaming on Overtime Select YouTube, as well as our TikTok and Instagram accounts for additional social coverage. August 3rd and 4th, 7th and 8th, August 16th and 17th, and September 14th and 15th are all of our games. So we're really excited. And yeah, no, keep tuning in. Keep following women's sports. It's on the rise, and our high school girls at Overtime Select are so excited to have an audience and have everybody watch and tune into them.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.